Hello painters, I am Uto and welcome back to a new video on the channel. Today we are taking a look at how this hobby week went, where I started painting the 20 skeletons we cleaned and assembled in the last week's video. I have to be honest, the week started actually pretty well. I was motivated, ready to go and quite excited to get started. But born after born I start to lose a bit of that momentum. And I found myself trying to come up with 1,000 different ways to keep the motivation up while painting all these identical models. But before jumping onto the models themselves, I start with the basis. It's a very quick step, but it always makes me feel like I've already completed an important part of the project. So I prepared 20 bases using the same ground recipe I used for the characters I painted earlier on the channel, the Necromancer and the Banshee. The first step was a black primer. After that I covered everything with Vallejo Heavy Sienna, followed by a dry brush of XV88 from Games Workshop, and finally a dry brush of Tyrant's School, a game from Games Workshop. And as always, if you want to follow this journey as I build and paint my very first army, consider subscribing to the channel and leave a like under the video. And of course, let me know in the comment what you are currently working on. But let's start from the beginning. After assembling all the models and giving them a white spray primer, I placed them on their bases, so I could get a first look at the full unit together. Seeing them all lined up like that already gave me a bit of motivation. At that point I started thinking about how I wanted to paint the bones. I really enjoy experimenting with new techniques and different recipes for painting specific elements. It helped me avoiding falling into the habit of always painting the same things in the exact same way. So I started doing a few tests. I tried using inks, some quick wash style approaches, a bit of the rebrushing, but none of the result really convinced me. At last I did what most of us do at some point, started looking online for some inspiration. At that moment, our Messiah, the one and only true Savior, came to the rescue. The recipe I ended up using comes straight from one of my favorite miniature painter, Venturella. Of course, I modified it slightly to better fit what I wanted to achieve with this unit, but I have to say, as always, it works beautifully. In his videos the process is obviously much more detailed, but for a large batch of models like this, some of those intermediate steps feel like a bit excessive. So I simplified the process a little to make it more manageable for a full unit. I started by laying down a base coat of a reddish grey tone. I used heavy warm grey from Vallejo, and once the base coat was done on all the bones, I went in with a generous coat of Agrax Earthshade, a wash from Games Workshop. I didn't worry too much about avoiding pooling or darker patches here and there. I knew I would come back to it later, repainting the raised areas and cleaning things up in the next step. After those first two steps, I really thought I was in a good place. All 20 models had already received the primer, the base coat and the Agrax wash. At that point, it felt like I had made some solid progress. But then I reached the real challenge of the project, the next step. So I did a few tests here as well, trying different shades of ochre, but in the end the K color really was the best option. and I decided to go with that one for the whole unit. To break the monotony a bit, I also painted one test model from start to finish, and you can see it is the one missing an arm and already with the shield. At first it actually helped a lot. I had a finished skeleton that I could use as a benchmark for the rest of the unit, and I really liked how it looked. That gave me the motivation to jump back into the project. But unfortunately I didn't know yet that after almost 10 models my motivation would start to fade again. Somewhere around the 8 or 9 skeletons, the reality of the project really started to sink in. At the beginning, everything felt. I found myself looking at the line of unpainted models on the desk and start thinking there are still so many left. And that's usually the dangerous moment in a project like this. The point where the motivation starts slipping and the temptation to put everything back in the box and continuing next week becomes very real. So instead of rushing through it or forcing myself to finish everything in one go, I try to slow down and focus on one skeleton at a time. Because in the end, with a project like this, the only real way forward is bone by bone. And that's when I stopped for a moment, started thinking about the project itself. Did I really need to finish the whole unit before Sunday to just publish the video? Or was that supposed to be the purpose of this channel? The answer was simple. Not really. At last, not right now. I don't want deadlines, I don't want challenges, and as I said, I don't want to turn this into a tutorial channel. What I really want is simply to share my hobby life, day after day, moment. So I decided I would get as far as I could, and that would be enough. Of course, that wasn't exactly easy for me. My personality naturally pushes me to try to finish things as quick as possible. I kept catching myself thinking things like, okay, now I'll do this step on 5 models, then next time I'll move on to the next step, and tomorrow I'll finish the next phase using that color, passing all the washes, etc. And at some point I realized something. I was doing it wrong. I wasn't having fun anymore. It wasn't relaxing. I was just creating something to post online. So at that point I felt a bit stuck. I had only just started the project and I was already questioning it, but in the end, that moment actually helped me. It made me realize that I simply needed to do what I felt like doing, while still keeping the bigger goal of the project in mind, building an army. My first vampire counts army. So I took a deep breath, gathered some motivation, and went back to painting the bones using a K buff. It was slow, it was long, and yes, it was pretty boring. But step by step, I managed to get through all 20 skeletons. And when it finally was done, it honestly felt a bit liberating. Seeing them lined up in ranks with actual color on them was really satisfying. If I am being honest, in the middle of the process, I also painted the unit's standard bearer, just to break the monotony a little. And that was actually a really nice change of pace. If everything goes well, I might even upload a time-lapse video of that miniature separately. Finally, I had 20 skeletons that were almost finished. To wake myself up a bit and break the routine, I decided to move on to another part of the models, the metal. Recently I have been trying to learn how to paint non-metallic metal. At the same time, I'm experimenting it with applying to a full army. Not the best choice. Luckily, with those skeletons I could play a bit with rusty effect and some bluish grey, creating something that was still very quick, but that had a nice visual impact on the table. After painting the base of the metal and that little break, I went back to the bones. By then there was really very little left to do, just a couple of quick steps. I started highlighting with a mix of buff and ivory, and then in some spots adding a final touch of pure ivory. Finally, the unit started to come together. Model after model, the highlights kept building up. The skeleton started looking more and more defined, and I actually liked the result. Finally, I felt like I found a good balance between quality and speed for painting bones. After this week, I have actually reached a pretty good point with the unit. There's really not that much left to do now. Just the metal on the weapons, a few glowing red eyes, and of course all the shields. But I don't think that should take too much time. While I was working on the unit, I also noticed a couple of things I might want to change. I found an old common group in my beatbox, a musician, a champion and a standard bearer, so I'm pretty sure I'll use those for the front rank of the unit. But I just need to decide whether to use the other standard bearer as well or keep the one that I already painted. But I think we will see how that goes in the next episode. And if you made it this far into the video, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. And let me know in the comments what are your tricks for beating the boredom of painting big units. Happy painting!